Hey there, welcome to Pepper Geek. Today I'm going to show you how to propagate peppers from start to finish. We live in Connecticut and we have a relatively short growing season, so this isn't something that we really do on a regular basis. But I'll show you the whole process, including some tips and tricks, because there are a few different reasons that you may want to grow plants from cuttings. When you propagate peppers, you're making an identical clone of the original plant. So it's a good way to preserve the genetics of a plant that you really like, and it's also a really fun project if you like experimenting and you want to watch a plant grow completely from a propagation. So with a little bit of patience, propagation can be very rewarding, and it's really interesting to watch a plant grow up close. These are two propagations, an ají cristal pepper and a sugar rush stripey plant, and I took these cuttings 100 days ago, so it's a very slow process, but they're growing new leaves, flowers, they look healthy, and even some small peppers are starting to form. So let's go back to the beginning when I took these cuttings and go through the whole process. First, you'll want to choose a plant that is healthy and actively growing. Try to avoid taking cuttings from plants that are stunted or diseased. If you do decide that you want to prune or top your pepper plants, this is also a great way to get cuttings for propagation. When you're taking your cutting, you'll want to choose a nice long stem that is green, healthy, and pliable. So here, I'm taking the cutting from the ají cristal plant. I like to make the initial cutting at a 45-degree angle, cut at an internode. This is the stem area between two leaf sets. This gives me a nice long piece of stem to work with, and it helps to ensure a sturdy plant at the time of transplant. And here I'm taking the second cutting from the sugar rush stripey plant. There isn't any particular reason why I chose these two plants. The original plants just looked really healthy and they looked like they would be good candidates for propagation. The next step is to remove all of the lower leaves and trim off any lower branches. You don't want the leaves sitting in water because they can rot. So for these propagations, I am using the water method. However, you can use soil, but I do find water to be a lot easier. At this point, you can also use a rooting hormone, but personally never had great results with rooting hormone, so I find it an unnecessary step and I typically skip that. Next, place the cutting in a glass of clean water and set it in a well-lit and warm location. So this could be a south-facing window or under grow lights. After taking the cutting, you do want to put it in water right away. You could also do this process outside in the summertime if it's warm enough. You do want to change the water every 5 to 10 days or so, just to keep it fresh and also help replenish the oxygen. And the next step is to wait for root growth. This can take a very long time. For peppers, it can take 1 to 2 months. And if you're interested in propagation and you want to do something a little bit quicker, tomatoes are a great plant to propagate, and we do have a video over on Geeky Greenhouse that you can check out if you're interested in that process. So every time you change the water, I suggest examining the cutting and looking for any roots that are starting to emerge. After I see a tiny bit of root growth, at this point, I like to add a couple drops of liquid fertilizer. This step is definitely optional, but I've kind of gotten into the habit of doing it with propagations, and I really like the results. I like to wait till the roots are several inches long before transplanting into soil. So when you propagate plants in water, they grow water roots. And these are very different than soil roots. They're a lot thinner and they're specialized in that they can absorb nutrients and oxygen in water, whereas soil roots are adapted to extracting nutrients from soil particles. This is why it's important to keep the soil consistently moist at first to help the remaining water roots function and help the transition period while new soil roots develop. Next, I'm going to show you how to transplant the cuttings into soil. Here, I'm transplanting the pepper into a nice, rich potting mix, just like you would if you were uppotting a small plant or a seedling. After transplanting, always give them a very good drink of water. So it's been 40 days since transplanting the cuttings into soil. And I did fertilize with fish emulsion once during that 40-day period. The potting soil already had nutrients in it, and these plants stayed outside in full sun, elevated on a table. And the reason I did that is because we've had a lot of critters and I did not want these to get eaten. Speaking of getting eaten, these cuttings were on our breezeway and the cat actually got to one of them and chomped away many of the leaves, but it recovered just fine. And here we are 100 days later from taking the original cuttings, and the plants look really good. We have nice healthy stems and foliage. I'm not entirely sure what the long-term plan is for these plants. I was thinking of maybe overwintering one, but I'm not really sure yet. But for the sake of this video, I am going to take one of these plants out just so I can show you the root growth. So a few tips and tricks if you are propagating peppers at home. You definitely want to take multiple cuttings because they don't always root. So if you're really set on propagating a plant, make sure you take a few cuttings to ensure that at least one of them is successful. And of course, you can propagate peppers directly in soil. So you would just take the cutting and make sure it's in a moist soil environment for a really long time. But I find propagation in water is much easier because you can see what's going on. You just have to change the water every 5 to 10 days. And if it's a successful cutting, you can actually see the roots growing. You can also use a plastic bag over your cutting to help ensure a nice humid environment. However, it's been really humid here this summer, so this wasn't really necessary. And of course, always check for pests. After taking the first cuttings, I noticed aphids all over the sugar rush stripey, so just make sure you give them a good rinse with the hose if you are going to be doing the propagations indoors. Again, we don't really propagate peppers very often, however, it can be a very useful tool if you want to preserve the genetics and make a direct clone of a plant. Hopefully this video helps with your propagations. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.